1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Albert Einstein once said that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. We think that is exactly what motivates side opposition, because if you take a look at the diverse reality of what's happening in Iran, we see a very volatile and violent situation wherein at any point these feminist leaders try and get some sort of traction, they get executed, they get imprisoned, and they get taken away, therefore destroying any form of progress that they've already made. Before I move on to my extension, a couple of rebuttals against the previous speaker. First, the previous speaker talked about how the US is not game, probably because Trump is very protectionist. We think Trump is also very capitalist. That is to say, as the feminist leader, if you come knocking to America and say, please help us, we are the feminist movement, in exchange, we're gonna tell you where their bases are, where their silos are, where they are coming from, how many people are in particular areas, you become a strategic chip to be able to get information, and that not only helps America, but it helps you because it allows them and their allies to be able to know where they should hit and how exactly they can get them access to information. Even if this are not the case, there are so many other progressive countries aside from the United States. We have a lot and majority of EU who in status quo have certain laws already to be able to protect refugees, just like the likes of Greece and Italy. And we think this actually becomes an incentive structure to be mutually beneficial for you as the leader and for them because you have strategic value. Secondly, they mentioned about how, oh, you're more proximate in Iran, therefore you can help more. We think that's a lie. You become more of a target because, as what my partner said, you already are red tagged by the state and already have a target against you. The point in which you keep staying is a point in which it only becomes a matter of time that they're gonna be able to crack down upon you. Why is the comparative better? 4 reasons. A, because it actually becomes harder to subdue you and your captivity if you're literally proximately farther. Meaning if you're not within their borders, you have international law protecting you because at the point in which they accept you as a refugee is a point in which they have to violate sovereignty in order to touch you. B, we think, as what my partner mentioned, these leaders also have a certain sense of rationality and don't exist in a singular spectrum. Meaning, side opposition can't just characterize all of these leaders as gung-ho, I'm gonna die and fight. Because a lot of these leaders are also worried and scared for their own safety, their own friends and family, and also their movement. In fact, I posit, if they're as gung-ho as they claim to be, that in itself is a visceral and emotional reaction, and we have to wake them up from their senses and tell them they should live to fight another day by taking 1 step back and taking 2 steps forward. C, we think the flip here is that if you die, which is likely to happen on side opposition, that's the point in which everything you stood for fragments. Because if what they're saying is true, and you really have a lack of cohesion, you are the beacon of hope for these particular women, and absent your ability to be safe is a point in which you don't get change. What is my extension? My extension is mechanizing how can fleeing to a progressive country better continue advocacy for the feminist movement and be able to galvanize support for legislative change, something that both sides want to quell. This is me burden pushing their side to explain the comparative of how they're going to be able to get legislative reform if they stay. Number 1, we have to understand that safety and security, as what Hesaya characterized in his speech, comes upstream for all of these particular motivations. Meaning, the intuition pump of Maslow's hierarchy of needs goes to show that you have your own interest to yourself as an actor and individual to protect and be safe before you go on out to try and do all of these actualization values of the feminist movement. But I'm going to take it further and say, in order for you to have a chance at fighting for the movement, you need to be able to preserve your own identity and dignity, and that comes as a consequence of you seeking refuge. Number 2, we think that a progressive country provides an alignment of ideology that bolsters and validates feminist ideology even more as opposed to the comparative. Why? We expand the Overton window of being able to understand what feminism really is about, and we allow them to be able to coalesce with other people who actually give a shit, other people who empathize, other people who don't just look at you as a rebel scum of which they're trying to eliminate. We think we ultimately are also able to actually do the third thing, which is to provide better media coverage and opportunity to galvanize support and allies that my partner talked about, that we heard no response, by the way, in order to get support to be able to, for them to rally behind you and bolster the movement. That is the alignment between a progressive country and you being able to go there, therefore aligning it with feminist ideology. How does this necessarily work? How does it lead to reform? A, you're able to understand the best of the best tactics in order to understand how we're able to get legislative reform. Why? Because in these progressive countries, they already have things like maternity leave and women's laws that allow them to be able to do things like vote, like drive, like get the same pay as men, and even the extent of saying these women, if they engage in like women-to-women relations, also even have things like same-sex marriage to be able to understand what are the legislative practices we can do to be able to get, you have a chance of benchmarking. B, you get access to more resources that are needed to be able to fight the good fight. Right now, side opposition is outcome dependent on the benevolence and visibility of other states. If they concede that traction is important and you need resources, on our side, we flip that, we co-opt that, and we say you get more resources, pushing you to be able to fight longer and harder. C, we think you're able to get better discourse and actually challenge the ideologies of the movement, because we don't want them to get stuck within their own Kool-Aid. Meaning we also want them to improve their strategy, as opposed to side opposition where they just shout louder and try and stay longer without necessarily pivoting or adjusting. Ultimately, we allow the feminist movement to actually grow, because in status quo, the point in which they actually grow too big is a point in which they get stifled and red tagged and killed. And for all of these reasons, we have to be strategic. We are very proud to oppose.